In this episode, I'm going to be talking about 5 performances you need to see from one of the greatest actors of all time, Marlon Brando. Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast exploring storytelling on film, as well as interviews with industry professionals who work in film, television, theater, among other areas of the arts. The first performance I'm going to be discussing today is Marlon Brando in A Streetcar Named Desire. I have it in this TCM box set here, along with some other great Brando performances. Let me just give you a brief plot for those of you who maybe have not seen it. Disturbed Blanche Dubois moves in with her sister in New Orleans and is tormented by her brutish brother-in-law while her reality crumbles around her. This was directed by Elia Kazan. The script, of course, was by Tennessee Williams based on his stage play. It was adapted by Oscar Saul. I hope I have that somewhat correctly. It, of course, starred Marlon Brando, as well as Vivien Leigh, Kim Hunter, and Karl Malden. Brando gives a phenomenal performance in this film, of course. This made him a star in Hollywood. He did the play on Broadway as well. And when I think about this film, of course I think about the famous Stella scene that we all know and love, that one of the most iconic scenes in the film. It's one of the most iconic lines, just a one word, Stella, in cinematic history. But when I think about this film, I think of different moments pop out to me. Before I get into that, Brando, he brings this raw, spontaneous performance that you can feel every single feeling that comes from him. The lines just come right out of his gut. His feelings just come right out of him as he follows his instincts. He's listening to the other actors. He's placing his attention on them. He's committed to what he wants in every single moment. And it's jaw-dropping. When I first saw it when I was 17, it holds up so well. Even today, it's so modern. It's so fresh. It seems like, how can anyone how is this even a performance? It's so real, and he's scary in it, but he brings a humanity to this character, which of course you see in the Stella scene in particular, right after he beat up his wife Stella, as he breaks down and cries before calling out to her, clearly the remorse and of what he did and how he can't believe it. So he brings a sense of humanity to it, as Marlon always does. He's not just playing someone who's brutish and making him a villain. He empathizes with him and brings so much more to it. But I remember once, it's one line in the film where he's on the phone. It's the moment right before he tells Blanche he's gonna send her back home on Tuesday. He gives her a ticket to get he's sick of her at this point, and he wants her out. And this is right after he has the dinner table scene, and he throws some of the cutlery on the wall, and he screams at everybody. It's an intense scene. And then when he's on the phone, someone calls, and Blanche in the background starts to talk, and he just turns and he screams, "Will you shut up?" And it comes, again, it's so real. He's not just stopping and yelling a line. It comes right out of his guts, right out of his instincts, right from his heart. And I can remember once, many years ago, fall asleep on the couch, and that moment came up on the screen, and it woke me up because it's so electric. It's so alive. It's like you feel like you're right there. He gives such a breathtaking performance. So Streetcar Named Desire certainly is a performance you have to see. After that, of course, his Oscar-winning performance, his first Oscar, on The Waterfront, which I have here on Criterion, which is an incredible release. I'll just give you a brief summary of the plot for those of you who perhaps haven't seen it, or if you haven't seen it for a little while. Ex-prize fighter turned New Jersey longshoreman struggles to stand up to his corrupt union bosses, including his older brother, as he starts to connect with the grieving sister of one of the syndicate's victims. This was also directed by Elia Kazan. It was written by Bud Schulberg. And it starred, of course, Marlon Brando, Karl Malden, Lee J. Cobb, Rod Steiger, and Eva Marie Saint. Everyone, of course, is incredible in this film as well. It's one of the most iconic films in cinematic history. It's one of the greatest films to come out of the classic Hollywood period. And again, when we think of this, so many iconic moments in this film, and when we think about this performance, we think, of course, about the iconic scene in the backseat of the cab between Rod Steiger and Brando, which is considered one of the greatest acted scenes in cinematic history. That I could have been a contender, I could have been somebody. Again, I love it. But when I think about this movie, I think about the end, when he goes to Lee J. Cobb's character and tears into him. This is right after he has testified against him, and he tells him that he's glad what he's done to him, and he screams it out to everybody. You hear that? I'm glad what I've done. And again, just like with all of his great performances, and like I said with The Streetcar, it's coming right out of his instincts, right out of his real feelings. And I think that's why you feel it so strongly, because he's coming from a deep personal place, and he had such raw intensity and the emotion he can bring to it. And it's because he's just truly committed to the moment. And again, it's stunning. You can feel it. It's like watching a stage play. It's like you're right there on the docks with those men, and it stirs emotion right up in me. I'm right along with him, and I feel tremendously for him, and I'm right on his side. It's incredible. And of course, just the humanity he brought to it, who, again, on the surface, this guy seems like a tough guy, a brute, this former boxer, but he has this real soft, gentle, compassionate side to him as well, which comes through with the love story with Eva Marie Saint. She really brings that out of him, and you see almost a boyishness in him. You see just like a completely different person, and it's a different side to his personality. And Brando just was able to, he can be so tough, and he can be so strong and so angry, but he can also just, with another character, and depending on the relationship, bring the other side to it, which is this vulnerability and this need for love and this need to connect, in this case, with Eva Marie Saint's character. And again, it's stunning. I think with a lesser actor, you may have only gotten one or the other. You may have only gotten like the rough-edged guy, or you would have just gotten the soft, the guy who's good at being vulnerable. But Brando can do anything. He can be so tough that it's hard to believe this guy also has this tenderness and this compassion and this empathy. You needed an actor who can really bring that range to it. And of course, as we know, he won an Academy Award for it. So stunning. If you haven't seen it, check it out. And if you've seen it, see it again, because it's one of my favorite Brando performances. After that, this is one of his lesser known performances and movies. Also in this little box that I have here, Reflections in a Golden Eye. I'll just give you a brief little summary here of the plot for those of you who perhaps haven't seen it. This is from 1967. It was directed by John Huston. This is an army major with a lusty wife battles his feelings of repressed love and obsession toward a young soldier on a 1940s base. The novel was by Carson McCullers. The script was by Chapman Mortimer and Gladys Hill. And of course, it had starred Marlon Brando, Elizabeth Taylor, Brian Keith, and Julie Harris. This is a film I've always loved, and it's not as well known as the other two that I just discussed. And again, Brando brings so much pain to this man who's not open with his homosexuality. Of course, 1940s. Here they are in a military post. He's in one of these army guys, and he can't come out. And he's married to in this this bad marriage with Elizabeth Taylor, and he's clearly is infatuated with this man who's another soldier on the base. And again, Brando is just totally vulnerable in this and brings so much intensity, so much pain and so much depth and misery to this man. Again, it's stunning. And the moments that pop out to me the most when I think of this film is we have this a horse is a metaphor basically for sex, and Elizabeth Taylor tells Brando he's not good at riding a horse, right? He's not good at which clearly it's coded for sex that he can't ride a horse, and so he's bad at riding a horse, and so he wants to prove that he's good at riding a horse, again, good at performing, and sexually, that is. And so what does he do? He jumps on her horse and rides it, and the horse runs off with him, and he nearly dies. I mean, he just is able to get off and slow the horse down, and he gets scratched up on his face, and then he beats the horse. It's a brutal scene. He beats the horse up with his whip. It's as if he's putting all that anger and all that repressed homosexuality into himself and his hatred of himself, and he's beating the horse up. Really, that's meant for hitting himself, like I said, and then he just breaks down and cries. And Brando doesn't just cry on screen. He full-on breaks down. This is not just a little whimper. This is not just an ECU of a few tears or even just a close-up of a few tears. It is so powerful, and it's a complete breakdown. I mean, again, it's what Brando does when he really commits. He does it better than anybody. He commits 100% to what the character is doing, and it comes right out of his gut, right out of his instincts, right out of his heart and his emotions. And again, it's absolutely stunning to see him as this character break down. And like I said with the other performances, you truly feel it from him. Later on in the film, he's teaching his class, and he's talking about what makes a leader, whether a leader is someone who has the strength to be sort of so strong that all of his cadets and soldiers under him know that he's strong. He's stronger than anybody. He's a leader. And, he talks about Patton and other military officials and people in the army. And he talks about what makes them a leader. And if you look at the dialogue, it just seems like he's giving the class an instruction. But Brando, again, he interprets it, and apparently John Huston loved what Brando did so much, not only in this take, but in another take, which was completely different. He had that ability to do something totally different every single take. He didn't even know which one to pick. They were so different. And here, Brando, from the beginning, he looks like he's about to cry as he's talking about leadership, and people who have leadership. And my interpretation of what he's feeling and his thinking that he brought to it is that he hates the fact that he feels that he's not strong and that he can't show strength to the people under him, clearly because he hates the fact that he's gay. He's a repressed homosexuality. He looks at this as weakness. He looks at this as something that he has to hate. And throughout the whole film, he's trying to compose the scene. He's trying to compose himself. He's trying not to break down. And you see how hard it is for him to do. Again, nothing in the dialogue suggests, just, from reading it, that this is something that an actor can bring to it. But as an actor myself, you can do a scene a million different ways so long as you can justify it. And he clearly brought so much to it that we know exactly what he means. We know exactly what he's experiencing. And it adds so much to the character and so much to the story that it's stunning. And someone once said, I forget who it was, but someone once, they had asked a bunch of deaf people who their favorite actor was, and they said Brando. The reason it was Brando is because they couldn't hear him, but they always knew what he was feeling because of his expressions and his emotions, because it didn't really matter what he was saying to them. They knew exactly what he meant based on his behavior. And acting, at the end of the day, is behavior and emotions, not just good line readings. It's about bringing something real to it. And again, it's a stunning performance and such a really good movie. After that, of course, I mean, this is a film, of course, we all know. It's kind of cliche at this point to bring it up because it's talked about endlessly. I love it. It's one of my favorite movies. The Godfather from 1972. This was directed by Francis Ford Coppola, based on the book by Mario Puzo. Coppola co-wrote the screenplay, adapted the screenplay with Mario Puzo. They both wrote it. Starred, of course, Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, James Caan, Robert Duvall, Diane Keaton, John Cazale. Let me just give a little plot for those of you who perhaps haven't seen it, but who hasn't. The aging patriarch of an organized crime dynasty in post-war New York City transfers control of his clandestine empire to his reluctant youngest son. It's a thick plot. I mean, just giving a little summary doesn't do it justice. You really have to see it because it's got strong on character and it's strong on plot, and it's a masterpiece in my view. But one thing I want to mention that is stunning with Brando is how relaxed he is on camera. And Robert Duvall mentions that, you know, when someone said action, Brando didn't just start acting, that there was no difference between action and cut. Like whatever he was doing before they yelled action, he was already, whether he was already started the scene or where the character may have been, so that as soon as they yell action, he's already in it, and he would just follow through. So he wouldn't just separate action cut. He was already in it from before the director said action. I believe that's what Duvall meant. He either meant that or that Brando would just had this quality of being able to step right into it and be able to step right out of it, and that it was hard to tell where the acting started and where it ended. But he's so relaxed, and at this point in his career, he didn't want to memorize scripts anymore, and he's reading the lines off cue cards. And there's even photos you can see where like his lines of dialogue are taped on the other actors. So I don't know how he, as an actor myself, first of all, that's incredibly stressful to not know the lines. And to, even if you place them perfectly, that's really hard. I remember Robert Duvall said he had tried it once and said he couldn't do it. And Duvall's one of the greatest actors ever in my book as well. But he could do it. I know Peter Falk in his autobiography said he asked himself why didn't he think of ever doing that. But you know, some people felt he just did that out of laziness because he didn't want to memorize the lines. I don't know if that's true. Maybe that's partly true. But he knew how to make it. He knew how to make it work. And if you watch him in films, he's not always looking directly at the other person or looking up. Sometimes his eyes are down or to the side, and people do that in life. You know, we don't hold eye contact for an entire conversation. People do look around, look down, look up. If they're saying something personal, they may find it hard to say, so they'll maybe look to the side. And if you look at Brando, he does that a lot, and I think really it adds so much to the mystery of the character. And he could be looking down and then suddenly look up, and you see, whoa, it's like stunning because all the emotion is in his eyes. And I think as a result of being so relaxed, he can bring so much to it. And James Caan mentions that in the first scene with Buonasera, Coppola put a cat on his lap. And, you know, James Caan said, you know, you put a cat in most actors' laps, they're going to start to play with the cat and, you know, the cat will become a distraction. But he just puts it there, and Brando's like, he still has contact with the other actor. He's still doing the scene. And he's just like, it's just there. It's just another prop. And it's seamless as he's like petting the cat like someone would in life. And when we think about this movie, we think of I'll Make Him an Offer He Couldn't Refuse. We think of so many of the iconic Godfather moments. I think about those moments, of course, but I think about when Buonasera leaves and he tells them, Tom Hagen and everybody in the room, okay, what we're going to do now to help Buonasera with his problem. And then right before the scene ends, he's got a little flower on his tuxedo. It's Connie's wedding, his daughter's wedding, and he just sniffs it. And it just cuts right there. And I think, you know, most people are not, would not, it's not that maybe he thought to do it, maybe he was told to do it, I don't know, but it's such an unconventional, interesting choice to suddenly just look down and smell a flower. Again, it just comes from being relaxed, and people do that, you know, they hold things in their hands, they play with things, they have props, and it becomes part of the character. And that's just something that for me It seems like a little thing, but little things add up to big things. And so, of course, it's probably one of his most known parts. But see it again, because there's so much he adds to it that is so small, these details that you may not even be aware of, but you can certainly feel. So if you've seen The Godfather, see it again. Of course, like I say with the other ones. And if you haven't seen it, what's wrong with you? Go see it. Last but not least, also have this one, Last Tango in Paris. This, of course, was directed by Bernardo Bertolucci. He wrote the story and the script with Franco Arcali. Agnes Varda did the French dialogue. I did not know that. I'm just here online. And even Jean-Louis Trintignant collaborated on dialogue. Interesting. I had no idea. That's a discovery from me right here on camera. This is not everybody's cup of tea, but I love it. I'll give you a short synopsis for those of you who haven't seen it. A young Parisian woman meets a middle-aged American businessman who demands their clandestine relationship be based only on sex. This also starred Maria Schneider. Again, you know, Brando gives this totally naked, vulnerable performance. I know that he didn't talk to Bertolucci for years after this. He felt that Bertolucci had manipulated him in some way to get certain things out of him. But he also, Bertolucci felt that he got something out of Brando that was very much his personality. And that he said this to him. He said, I got you on the screen. I didn't get the guy from the actor studio, though, who's known as this legendary method actor. I got you, and that's what I wanted. And then Brando said, you think that guy's me? Ha, ha, ha. But, okay, you know, it's a character at the end of the day. But if you watch Brando in interviews and watch him in this, there is something in his personality that comes through here that I've seen in those interviews that you don't see in his other films. That's just my opinion. That was just my impression. Because he has this sense of humor about him that he's very, very funny. And for me, he's rarely funny in movies. I mean, his humor, he didn't really do a lot of comedies. He did occasionally. And the comedies he did were never very good. But he had a sense of humor that in interviews, I'm on the floor rolling laughing. I mean, I think he's a hilarious person. And some of that comes through in a dark way in this film. But apart from that, yeah, again, a lot of the emotions I already touched on in the other performances we see here, but in a darker and deeper way in terms of this man whose wife has committed suicide and the pain he's in and his need to escape his pain through sex. And so, you know, it begins with him just screaming out, fucking God, you know, when he's, the camera just sweeps in from a high angle and goes right up into his face. And right away, he's this broken man. He's like, you know, on the brink of tears outside. And when I think of this performance, I think of when he goes to the funeral parlor and is talking to his dead wife. And he starts to insult her and tear into her because she had cheated on him. And then he just begins to break down over her. And every time I see it, it brings me to tears. I mean, it is so raw, naked, vulnerable. And again, just seems like I feel like I can't watch it. Not that I can't watch it, but I feel as though it is so private that I shouldn't be watching it. It's just like I'm in that room and I shouldn't be here because this man's breaking down over this woman. But he is just something else in this film. And again, just that brooding quality, the man, you know, he averts his eyes and looks down. It brings a mystery to him. It makes you curious about him. There's another moment with his mother-in-law early in the film when he suddenly gets mad at her because he didn't want something in this funeral that they were going to do for her. I believe it was that he didn't want a priest at the funeral. And she's protesting, and he's calm at first, and then suddenly he just goes, no! And again, it's just because, again, it's coming out of his instincts, his emotions, it's right, spontaneous, in the moment. He doesn't plan anything. That's why he's so great. He just lets whatever happens, so long as he's committed to what he's doing, which is to tell his mother-in-law to back off in this case. And he gets so mad, he starts punching the door. And again, it feels like such a private moment. Like I shouldn't be watching it because it's so real. It goes beyond acting. It's one of those beautiful moments where I forget I'm watching a movie. I'm just looking at a real person on screen, a real person who happens to be on TV. Like, it's just like, it's unbelievable. And again, I think it's one of the greatest performances he ever gave. And I've always loved the film. I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about it, but I have always loved this film. So that's another one that you got to check out. If you haven't seen it, and if you've seen it, see it again, because it's one of his great performances. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. These are 5 performances with Marlon Brando you need to see or see again and again. If this is your first time here, please consider subscribing by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the Movies logo. You will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.